Hello. Today, let's take a trip back 60 years to a mysterious case with unexpected twists in a California courtroom. A young pregnant mother stood in the defendant's seat, facing murder charges. She was accused of shooting her husband from behind with a rifle as he was about to leave the house. Facing the prosecution's accusations, this woman, Theresa, firmly claimed she acted in self-defense. She testified that her husband was not only an alcoholic but also frequently abusive toward her. Her testimony moved the courtroom deeply, and on May 22, 1964, Theresa was acquitted. She walked out of the courtroom with her head held high. She was only 18 years old. At first, it seemed like the story ended there with a happy ending for the young mother. But 55 years later, this woman reappeared before the public in a way no one expected. A horrifying truth slowly unraveled. What really happened? Let's follow the trail of time step by step to uncover the dark secrets of Theresa's life. The story begins on October 14, 1946, when Theresa Jimmie Francine Knorr was born in Sacramento, California. Theresa's mother, Swannie, already had 2 children from a previous marriage before marrying Jim. Theresa's birth added to the family but also increased the financial burden. Her father, Jim, worked at a local dairy making cheese. Despite a small salary, he worked hard to support the family. After about 5 years, they finally bought a small house in the town of Rio Linda. Life seemed stable then, but the peace didn't last long. In the late 1950s, Jim was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a degenerative neurological disorder primarily affecting motor functions. His condition worsened, causing stiffness and difficulty moving. Eventually, he could no longer do the cheese-making work he loved. During this time, Swannie had to bear the entire family's responsibility alone. Her income barely covered their daily living expenses. Worse yet, losing his job led Jim into deep depression. He took out his anger and frustration on his loved ones. The once peaceful home was now filled with shouting and fighting. Tragedy struck on May 10, 1961. Physically and mentally exhausted, Swannie took her last breath due to heart failure. This devastating loss hit Theresa hard. She was very close to her mother. With the family's economic pillar gone, they plunged into financial ruin. Jim was forced to sell the house they had worked so hard to buy. Suddenly, the whole family became homeless. On May 29, 1962, 16-year-old Theresa dropped out of school and married 21-year-old Cliff Kandor. From an outsider's perspective, this marriage was risky from the start. She had no solid support, but she desperately wanted a new home to heal the broken family wounds. More practically, she needed someone to lean on and shelter from life's storms. A year later, Theresa gave birth to a son, Shabu. But instead of bringing happiness, the child's arrival escalated tensions. Fights between the couple became more frequent. Theresa accused Cliff of cheating, while Cliff claimed she was irrationally jealous without cause. On June 22, 1964, she even reported Cliff to the police, accusing him of domestic violence. However, when the case went to trial, Theresa withdrew the charges for reasons unknown, a family tragedy still shrouded in mystery. The climax came on July 6, 1964. Cliff had just celebrated his birthday and returned home, but instead of congratulations, he was met with Theresa's fury. She scolded him for partying all night with friends instead of staying home with family. The arguments escalated, and in anger, Cliff declared he wanted a divorce and left. As he turned away, Theresa grabbed the rifle, the very scene we talked about at the start of this video. During the trial, the prosecution presented witness testimonies to disprove Theresa's self-defense claim. Friends and family of Cliff testified he was not violent. Cliff's sister bluntly claimed Theresa was the controlling one in the relationship, possessing a strong possessive streak and never tolerating Cliff interacting with other women. But just as the trial was about to end, Theresa dropped a bombshell. She announced she was pregnant. The prosecutor believed this announcement swayed the jury, leading to Theresa's acquittal. After the trial, jurors comforted Theresa, telling her to rest and focus on her pregnancy and forget the past. 6 months later, on May 16, 1965, Theresa gave birth to a daughter named X. Now a single mother with no support, Theresa soon turned to alcohol to cope. She was often drunk at the local American Legion Hall, where she met a new lover, Estelle. However, this relationship quickly soured. Estelle discovered Theresa was irresponsible and unfaithful with his friends. Angry, Estelle left. Soon after, Theresa met Robert Raw, a Marine. They quickly fell in love and married on May 9, 1966, when she was 2 months pregnant. She gave birth to her third child, Swannie. In the next 4 years, the couple welcomed 3 more children, William, Robert Gia, and Terry. Though she kept having children, the marriage was unhappy. Both had fiery tempers, leading to frequent fights and domestic violence. Tragically, their outbursts were often taken out on the innocent children. Theresa repeatedly suspected Robert of cheating, accusing him frequently. By December 1970, just 3 months after their youngest daughter was born, Robert separated from Theresa. A few months later, he officially filed for divorce, ending their turbulent marriage. Feeling ashamed and angry, Theresa tried everything to keep Robert from seeing the kids. She used various tactics to control his visitation rights and keep the children under her control. These actions only fueled more conflict and hatred between them. Since then, Theresa's life became even more chaotic. In 1971, she hurriedly married an iron worker, but the marriage lasted only a few months. The husband couldn't handle her constant drinking and neglect of the children, and he left. The following year, Theresa married a newspaper editor. This husband seemed kind, and her daughter Susan quickly bonded with him. But this caused tension between Theresa and Susan. In November 1976, just 3 months after marrying the editor, Theresa filed for divorce again. The reason? She discovered her husband was also working as a nude photographer for women. However, based on available information, the photos were consensual. This divorce marked a temporary pause in Theresa's turbulent love life. Later, psychological analysis suggested her multiple failed, conflict-ridden marriages were evidence she might have borderline personality disorder. This disorder is characterized by unstable long-term relationships, intense mood swings, and fear of abandonment. Though she showed no typical signs of self-harm or reckless behavior, her long-term alcoholism could be considered an addiction symptom, reflecting severe emotional regulation issues. Her frequent accusations of infidelity may have been projections of her deep-seated abandonment fears. It's important to note personality disorders are not predetermined diseases, but part of long-term personality traits, often linked to failure in developing independent self-identity during adulthood. This condition forces dependency on others for survival, rooted in early childhood experiences. The marriages of Theresa clearly show these signs. Like genetics, environment plays a huge role in personality expression. You might have noticed Theresa was often accused of being an unfit mother. She was addicted to alcohol, emotionally unstable, frequently neglecting her children or leaving them with new partners while she went out partying all night. After her fourth and final divorce, Theresa's mental state hit rock bottom. She gained weight and withdrew socially, cutting off phone contact and isolating herself from the world. She moved her children to Odenville for a long time and forced them to read and memorize the Bible while strictly controlling their relationships. Unbeknownst to her, her youngest daughter, only 6 years old, was suffering abuse from Hogg, her oldest brother. When Theresa found out, she violently beat Hogg, hoping to stop his wrongdoing, but unfortunately redirected her anger at innocent Terry. When kind neighbors gave Terry clothes, Theresa outwardly thanked them, but then stripped Terry and locked her in the house. She even forced her 3 sons to tie Terry up so she could whip her easily. Theresa threatened to harm Terry worse if she ever told anyone about their family situation. Later, the family moved to a small house in Sacramento. The oldest son, Habayu, ran away from home. Only 2 bedrooms remained, yet the family still had 5 children, living in extreme overcrowding. Theresa didn't allow her children to attend school past 8th grade. No one ever heard what the children endured. Susan, the 3rd child by her second husband, suffered the most abuse. Her close bond with the stepfather made Theresa jealous. Susan was the most rebellious, and Theresa often called her a witch and beat her. After a brutal beating, Susan couldn't take it anymore and ran away at 15. The police found her wandering the streets and took her to a local mental hospital. There, Susan finally told someone about her years of suffering, but no one really listened. Police didn't thoroughly investigate, and hospital staff ignored her wounds. Instead, they dismissed her pleas, believing Theresa's version that Susan was mentally ill, and returned her to Theresa. In other words, the police sent Susan back to hell. After returning home, Theresa not only brutally beat Susan, but also forced her siblings to take part in her abuse. She locked Susan under the kitchen table and made the other children take turns guarding her for 2 years. Sitting crouched for long hours caused Susan's legs to swell and bruise. Although Theresa allowed Susan to eat, she forced her to wear a gag, making eating difficult and causing her to vomit often. Susan begged her mother for forgiveness, but Theresa remained cold-hearted. On May 16, 1984, Theresa lost her temper again and began beating her children. She temporarily released Susan but told Terry to point a gun at her sister, threatening to shoot if Susan tried to escape. Terrified, Susan stayed still, but then a spoon fell to the floor, startling Terry. In the chaos, Terry accidentally fired the gun and Susan collapsed, bleeding heavily. Seeing her daughter's blood, Theresa's first reaction was to hide under the table. Her second reaction was to complain about the dirty carpet. Susan begged to go to the hospital, but Theresa refused. She tried to treat Susan herself by leaving her in the bathtub. Miraculously, Susan survived. She begged to leave, and sensing the seriousness, Theresa agreed, but demanded the bullet be removed first. Taking advantage of Susan's unconsciousness, Theresa cruelly extracted the bullet herself, disregarding the risk of infection. Theresa packed Susan's few belongings in a plastic bag and taped her hands, feet, and mouth shut. She ordered her sons, Robert J. and William, to drive Susan away. It's worth noting that although Theresa abused all her children, William and Robert Gia gradually became her henchmen, perhaps because they were less abused or knew this was the only way to survive. In summary, the two brothers obediently drove Susan to Squaw Valley, California, site of the 1960 Winter Olympics. Following Theresa's orders, Susan, still unconscious and bound, was doused with gasoline. A match was struck, and the flames consumed the 17-year-old girl's life. Yes, even as she burned alive, Susan was still alive. The next day, passers-by discovered the charred remains. Due to the body's severe damage, only a few personal items remained, so police could not identify her. She was known only as Jane Doe number 660785. The police created a composite sketch of the victim. Susan never stopped fighting. She struggled, resisted, and despite the pain, never gave up her desire for freedom. Had she been born into a normal family, her life could have been bright and beautiful. Susan's death didn't satisfy Theresa's twisted desires. She then turned her cruelty toward her eldest daughter. Now 20 years old, X was still young and beautiful compared to her aging mother. Experts later analyzed that Theresa was jealous not only of Susan, but also of X's youth and beauty. Starting in May 1985, Theresa forced X into prostitution to support the family. X suffered abuse from a young age and was unable to integrate into society normally. Even when free from home, she remained trapped in her mother's darkness, never daring to rebel. Her submission might have come from realizing that resistance never changed the abusive environment. Thanks to California's welfare system, Theresa lived a relatively prosperous life for a time, like a queen ruling over a horror house. She enjoyed the money X earned and absolute obedience from her children. But those good times didn't last long. Theresa's jealousy resurfaced. She screamed and accused X of secretly getting pregnant, claiming she contracted an STD from sharing a toilet with her. X denied the accusation. Another beating followed as punishment. Theresa treated her eldest daughter like a pet and locked her in a small closet. Terry, the youngest, recalled that Theresa forced X to confess under beatings. She only stopped after X admitted the alleged crime. Theresa forbade anyone from giving X food or water, but Terry secretly gave her a bottle of beer to help her endure. In June 1985, the house temperature was constantly around 30 degrees Celsius. Though X admitted her pregnancy to her mother, Theresa kept her locked in the closet. 3 days later, on June 21st, X died of dehydration and starvation. She was found curled up as if still in the womb, begging for protection. 3 days after, Theresa remembered to open the closet, only to find X already dead and in early decomposition. Unable to bear the stench, Theresa forced William and Robert Gia to put the body in a cardboard box and dump it in an empty lot near Chuco Airport, Nevada. Hours later, the body was discovered and again unidentified. Though the body was disposed of, the foul smell haunted the house for a long time. At this point, Theresa began to fear. On May 21, 1986, about a year after X's death, Theresa packed up and left the Sacramento house, instructing Terry to burn it down to destroy evidence. Luckily, neighbors called the police in time. The fire caused minimal damage and didn't expose Theresa's crimes, but left important clues. Then Theresa started a life on the run. William and Robert Gia cut off contact with her. Robert Gia moved to Las Vegas, where he was sentenced to 16 years for shooting someone during a robbery. To avoid police, Theresa relocated to Salt Lake City, Utah, living in hiding. It seemed no one planned to tell this story to the police, except one person, Terry. The youngest daughter never forgot her two older sisters. At 16, Terry left her mother using X's fake ID to pass as an adult. After wandering, She too ended up in Utah, married twice, and worked as a cashier at a supermarket. Coincidentally, the neighborhood she settled in was next to where her mother lived in hiding. She could pretend nothing happened, but Terry refused to stay silent. After leaving her mother, Terry reported her mother's crimes to the police, accusing her of killing her two older sisters. The police dismissed her accusations as a sob story. Even Terry's psychological counselor didn't believe her. In desperation, on October 28, 1993, Terry called the American TV show America's Most Wanted. Fortunately, the show's staff didn't mock her story and guided her to contact the Blaze County Police in California. Blaze County Police were the ones who discovered Susan's body years ago. They didn't ignore this late lead. Based on Terry's detailed descriptions of her sister's medical conditions, they quickly confirmed the identities of the two Jane Does found in 1984 and 1985. With Terry's help, they also found the house that hadn't been completely burned and the closet where X was imprisoned. The floor beneath the closet held important evidence speaking for the victims. On November 10, 1993, police arrested William in Woodland, California. Robert Gia, already in prison, was charged in connection with the murders. On November 18th, Theresa was arrested in Salt Lake City while caring for an 86-year-old landlord, appearing kind and gentle. Facing the charges, Theresa initially denied everything and tried to plead not guilty. However, when she learned Robert Gia had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors for a reduced sentence, she decided to plead guilty. She was convicted on 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 counts of aggravated circumstances, including multiple killings and torture. Because she pleaded guilty, Theresa avoided the death penalty and received a life sentence instead. Given her family circumstances and long-term mental health issues caused by abuse, police did not prosecute her 2 sons. William received a suspended sentence with psychological treatment. Robert Gia got 3 years added to his existing 16-year sentence. After the case closed, police moved on to another murder case. You might recall that when Theresa was born, her mother already had a son and daughter. Her half-sister Rye was murdered in 1983 in the same county where Susan's body was found. Police suspected Theresa's involvement in that mysterious case, but no conclusive evidence was found. In July 2019, Theresa applied for parole but was denied. Now 79 years old, she remains imprisoned at the California Women's Prison in Kilo. Her next parole hearing is scheduled for July 2025. Sadly, the good die young while the wicked live long. Terry, brave enough to speak out for her deceased sisters who passed away suddenly from illness in 2011, is the youngest daughter of Theresa, sharing her mother's name but making completely different life choices. Born into a broken family, Theresa never formed a complete sense of self, leading to extreme emotions and severe addiction, worsening her condition. She couldn't build healthy relationships, but craved attachment. Ultimately, the clash between ideals and reality led to resentment and trauma. Like her father before her, Theresa followed a similar dark path. But Terry's life seemed even darker. From birth, she never had a stable family, witnessed her sister's deaths, but instead of giving up, she chose to resist. In difficult circumstances, these 2 sisters show us different ways of living. This reminds us that when trying to understand evil, external factors like family background are important, but we must not ignore individual choice. Preventing crime means minimizing harmful external factors like violence, poverty, and substance abuse. Through proper education and psychological support, we encourage individuals to choose behaviors that benefit social stability. Always stay alert and keep yourself safe. That's all for today's video. See you in the next one. Goodbye.